Dear friends, I'm Ravi Teixeira from International Movement of Catholic Students, Pax Romana. In this year, we are celebrating the 100 years anniversary of our movement, Pax Romana. So in celebration, we are doing a series of interviews under the campaign 100 Years in Storytelling of Pax Romana. Through this interview, we bring Dr. Victor Karunan, former member of IMCS and ICMICA. I hope that you would enjoy this interview as much as I enjoyed. Hi, Victor. It's so good to have you in the 100 Years in Storytelling. Welcome.
Hi, Ravi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Good. It's so good to see you. So, maybe let's just start with introducing yourself. Tell us about you and where you're coming from and what is your background.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Victor Karunan. I'm from India. I was born in Bangalore in 1954 in a quite a middle-class Catholic family. So we all had a very Catholic education and early childhood, all five of us at home. My father was a very famous Catholic journalist in India, so he's well known both in India and in Asia. That in a way shaped also our early life within the family. And I think that did influence me as I look back at my childhood. My father's skills in terms of his leadership, his writing, his public speaking, he was a great networker. And within the church, working with people at different levels, I think that really influenced me, and I learned a lot from him. So that was my sort of early background. So as I went through school, I also got involved with various actions by students. At that time, we were very keen to do some social work. So my first exposure started when I think I was in later high school. When the priest in the church, in the cathedral, asked volunteers, students, to come and help to work in a slum, a squatter area close by. There were about 150 families. Majority of them were Muslim and Hindus, very few Catholics or Christians. And our job was to do physical work and build a community center. There was an old building that was not being used. And the priest's idea was to build a community center for the people, so they can meet, the children can play, etc. So I got interested in that project because it was very close to my house, like walking distance just behind. So I volunteered and started work with a group of about 20, 25 other students and friends. That to me was my first exposure to people in ordinary life. To the poor especially. The more we spent time there, we worked with the children, with the adults in the slum. They taught us a lot of skills because we were not as middle class students. We knew very little about construction, But we learned a lot of skills, we had fun, we got to know each other, we knew their families, and we also came to know more and more the problems and challenges. And that started posing a lot of questions to me. Why are these people poor? What is preventing them to lead the type of life, that privileged life we have? Why the children are not able to go to school? Why they're not able to buy medication when they fall sick, etc. and so on. So that started going over and over in my mind as a reflection, so to speak. So I started asking the priest and other people, what more can we do to help these people? And that first exposure when I was right in high school, in a way, was the reason why I got involved in the Catholic Students Movement. So some years later, the chaplain at that time, a Franciscan priest in Bangalore, who's still a very good friend of mine, came to me and said, we are going to organize these student camps by the All India Catholic University Federation. ICUF, it was called. I never knew about it at that time. And said, you should come because you're asking a lot of questions. You will find a lot of answers to your questions. That's how I started. So I went for one of the camps of the ICUF, about 40, 50 of us gathered together. We had good fun. I really enjoyed it. Music and telling stories and jokes and so on. But we also had some serious sessions. We had a presentation on social analysis by Father Stan Ludusami, who passed away, as you know, recently. Yeah? He is the first one I met who taught me social analysis. And that, in a way, did provide some answers to the questions that I had. And very soon I went back and I said, okay, I want to be part of this organization in Bangalore. Yeah. So I began first in Bangalore, and very soon when we came back, I was elected as the president of ICAF in Bangalore. That is my first official position within ICAF. And because of that, I was able to participate in ICAF training sessions, contribute articles to the Rally, which was the English magazine journal that UNICEF, that ICAF was bringing out, and got connected with a number of students from other parts of India. And for me, the highlight of that work with ICAF was in 1969, when after joining ICAF and participating in 1971 in the ICAF National Convention in Calcutta, where we brought out the famous Calcutta Declaration. Now, that declaration was significant because for the first time, it tried to provide a critical analysis of Indian society, largely influenced by Marxism. As you know, the student movements were very much Marxist influenced at that time, and it tried to tackle this whole debate between Christianity and Marxism. Yeah, so it was very controversial, but we as students felt that we had really found an answer to that dilemma. And that for me was one of the best meetings that we had, the intensive discussions, the reflections, the analysis, and the outcomes from that meeting. Soon after we came back, I think people realized that, I really can contribute to ICAF. And I was elected at the National Convention in Chennai, in Madras at that time, as the National President of ICAF. So I became the National President of ICAF between 1975 and 1976. Now, mind you, this was the time of the Indian emergency, a type of civilian martial law, you can call it, by Indira Gandhi. And they were arresting and harassing student movements, workers' organizations, farmers, and intellectuals all over the country. So we issued a statement on behalf of ICAF. We condemned the emergency. We condemned the authoritarian actions that were being taken by the government against people, the grassroots organizations, and therefore we were reprimanded. We were arrested for a few days. Yeah. So we really suffered at that time. ICAF was nearly banned by the church and by the Indian government during that time. Somehow we survived. Yeah. And that, in a way, gave me the experience of working at the national level with students from all different cultures, religions, being exposed to diverse ideas, other religions as well, because many of the ICAF students at that time were also Hindus and Muslims. We not only had Christians in the movement, we also had many Hindus, Muslims, and others. So it helped with interfaith dialogue as well. And it really helped my intellectual development, but also strengthened my commitment for the people and the student movement. Yeah. So having worked then, and then moving on I went to Delhi. I then lived 10 years in Delhi to do my master's in Jawaharlal Nehru University in sociology. And that took me to the secular student movement. I became very active in the student movement in JNU in Delhi and got involved with big campaigns like the campaign against the Union Carbide gas disaster in Bhopal. We were one of the first student groups that campaigned and went to Bhopal to campaign for the people who suffered during the Bhopal crisis, and many others. So over 10 years, I was then working at the national level, supporting ICAF as an advisor, but working very much with the secular student movement in Delhi, based in Delhi. And I was then invited to participate in the Pan-Asian Assembly of IMCS That's my first encounter with IMCS. IMCS organized its Pan-Asian Assembly in 1979 in Penang, in Malaysia. I went as part of the 10 delegates from India to that conference. And there, to my surprise, I got elected as the Asian Secretary of IMCS. I then moved to Hong Kong, worked with Raka Wing from Thailand, Elizabeth from Hong Kong, and later she left, and Chi Peng, first from Malaysia, then Chi Peng left, and Elizabeth took over. So myself, Raka Wing from Thailand, Elizabeth from Hong Kong were the Asian team, with Father Jack Lancy. At that time, he was a Maryknoll priest, who was our chaplain. I moved to Hong Kong and worked as the Asian Secretary for 3 years, 79 to 82. That even helped me further expose myself to student movements all over Asia. And it was amazing because this was a period, as you see in the 70s and 80s, when the student movement was really at its peak. In Korea, in the Philippines, in Sri Lanka, in India, in Thailand, Indonesia, all over, student movement was on the upsurge during that period. And IMCS, in a way, responded to that situation and therefore became very active and visible in the struggles of the student movement in Asia. It was the best time, I think, to work with the student movement in the region, all over the region, in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. So that exposure for student movements in Asia, and then my first World Assembly of IMCS and YCS, which was held in Valladolid in Spain in 1978, exposed me to the global nature of IMCS. And that's where I realized that IMCS is really an international movement, which is spread all over the world. And there's so much experience and work being done by student movements from all over the world. So I felt part of a global movement, so to speak. So I completed my term in 1992 as Asian Secretary and handed over at our assembly in Colombo in Sri Lanka. But still, after that, I went back to India and I wanted to work with farmers because I've always had an interest since my early years to work with peasants and farmers in the villages. So I spent 2 years in a village in Maharashtra, went back to the grassroots and worked with them. These were mostly sugarcane farmers. Worked with them to understand their situation, do research on their struggles, and to document their struggles in India. I still kept in touch with IMCS as an advisor periodically when I had the opportunity, but I moved then into more working with NGOs and civil society. And that's what also started my academic career. I started teaching in India in a few places based on the research that I was doing. So, in short, my history or journey of years of work since 1969, when I started and encountered this Catholic students movement in India, has gone through different phases. But each phase in a way is connected to the other. Yeah. What I learned in the student movement, I then brought to the social movement. Whether I worked with farmers or whether I worked with workers' organizations or indigenous peoples or tribals in India and so on, I took the knowledge, the experience, and the vision that I had for change in India for the people who are struggling which was drawn very much from the student movement. I forgot to mention one thing. When I was finishing high school, my father wanted me to be a doctor. So I did. I had very good grades in high school. So I enrolled in St. John's Medical College and I did 1 year of medicine, thinking I'm going to become a medical doctor. And this is exactly during that time that I got exposed to this work in the slum and joined and started participating in activities of ICAF. I came back home one day and told my father, Dad, I think the medical career is not for me. I want to do something much more meaningful. I want to work with the people. I want to understand their situation and contribute to them. So I'm interested more in social work. I'm interested more in the social science. My father was shocked. Why would I give up a career in medicine and go to social sciences? Yeah. Social science was like the third grade course that you choose when you don't get medicine or engineering, right? That is same in India as well. Okay, mind you, I kept my commitment to my father. Many, many years later, 1993, I got my PhD degree, my doctorate in Holland. I went to Holland, defended my thesis, got the doctorate and got the huge certificate in a row. I flew back to India, went to my father and gave him the certificate, the doctoral certificate. And I told him, Dad, here you have a doctor in the house. But mind you, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor in philosophy. My father cried. He really cried. He was so proud of me that I had my PhD, my first PhD in the house. Yeah. And he really cried. And he understood what I was trying to tell him. And from that on, he supported me right up to the end of his life when he passed away in 1975. So that's been my journey over all these years.
That's so nice to know that the step by step how you had gone from the national level to the Asian level to the international level. So tell us a little bit more about your experiences in the international IMCS office, and then I think you ICMICA also. So share some stories about your engagement in these levels and how it impacted in your life.
Yeah, I think looking at IMCS and ICMICA as a global movement, yeah. With ICMICA, I was already professionally involved in research and teaching and so on. And that's how I connected with some of my ICMICA colleagues in Asia as well as in Europe, for example, who then brought me into kind of contact with some of the professional associations, that ICMICA has for lawyers, has a good network of lawyers, especially on human rights in Latin America. It has a group of philosophers and sociologists in Europe. I connected with many of them, yeah. And that's when I showed interest. So I went for the ICMICA World Assembly that was held, I think, in London, is when I felt, I need to give some time to this. I need to commit myself. And they elected me as Secretary General of ICMICA to be based in Geneva from, that was 1988 to 1992, 4 years. Yeah. At that time, ICMICA was really very much in the forefront of human rights work. We worked very closely with the Human Rights Council, the old Human Rights Council, and ICMICA with Pax Christi, with Amnesty International, International Commission of Jurists, and many other international human rights organizations. We were always in every session making statements on human rights violations in Asian countries, Latin America, Africa. We were chair and secretary in many working groups of the United Nations. We were always invited for those meetings and conferences that were held. At that time, it was the development decade, the various UN conventions on discrimination, indigenous peoples, decolonization, etc. Yeah, and we were very much part of those discussions. Second, I think for me that was another rich experience that I've been fortunate to have, having worked with both IMCS and ICMICA, is that intellectually, we were very much at the forefront of cutting-edge knowledge, research, and thinking about social issues. And because the movement had branches all over the world, we were able to exchange views, ideas with Africa, with Asia, with Latin America, Europe, Australia. And therefore, cross-border learnings was a key factor, yeah, in strengthening our motivation, but also helping us intellectually to grow, to enhance our knowledge. The third, I would think, which was a highlight, was the fact that both with IMCS and with ICMICA, we became a strong voice within the church. Yeah. Young people who we were representing as students or as professionals were very much seen as leaders in many churches at the local levels. Even with, for example, in our region, with the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference, FABC. Yeah. They always invited us, they always supported the work that we're doing, and we had very good contact and communications with bishops' conferences and with various commissions in the Vatican as well. And we were able to bring our thinking, whether it was structural analysis, whether it was liberation theology, or whether it was issues about student movements and lay people, students and young people as lay leaders in the church, we were able to contribute to those debates and discussions. A key difference, and that's my fourth point, I think the biggest stimulus for us at that time, both in IMCS and ICMICA, was Vatican II. Now, Vatican II had many lessons for us. The first and most important lesson was that we need to localize the church. We need to discover the mission of the church in the local, cultural, social context of people, their lives, their traditions, their values, and their cultures. So in many countries like India, the Philippines, Thailand, in this region, for example, as well as in other parts of the world, many of us worked with people within the church to try to change the identity of the church in our local cultures. Not only using the local language, but also symbolism and linking various religious traditions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Taoism, Confucianism with Christian values, and trying to see the commonality in those common human values. Yeah. That was a key factor that helped us to be able to see our mission and our role as IMCS or as ICMICA. And in the intellectual debate that was going on in the United Nations and international organizations and even within the church, I think the group of Catholic intellectuals were a key player in many countries. Now, many of them I know by name and by friendship have also taken up key positions within governments in many countries, right? How many Pax Romana people have been in government? Yeah, including the Minister of Culture in Nicaragua, for example, Ernesto Cardenas, yeah, and people like that, yeah. So we've had key leaders from the movement of Catholic intellectuals who have contributed not only their intellectual ideas and vision, but also have played critical roles in leadership within the church and in society. And I think what framed that possibility for us was both within the changes in society, where people are searching for a new alternative, for a new society, at the same time, the struggle within the church for a new identity, for its mission, and the role of lay people within the church. All these were very hot topics during the time of the 80s and 90s and so on. And we were very much at the forefront, I would say, as IMCS and as ICMICA in contributing to those discourses and contributing our vision and our perspectives for a better society.
Yeah, this Pax Romana movement, which has the two branches, IMCS, ICMICA, that basically you have gone through all the levels of the entire movement. It is pretty impressive.
Yes.
And while you were working with the Pax Romana movement, you started engaging with the other civil society organizations, and then you worked with the UNESCO and so many different UN bodies. How they impacted in your professional life, and how that journey has been?
Yeah. So having come out of the student movement, then working on human rights with social movements, gradually moving into research, academia, and right through that period, I think I reached a point when I really wanted to commit myself for international work. Yeah, and I think IMCS and ICMICA really helped me in that. Now, when I made the decision to join the UN, United Nations, UNICEF, here in Thailand in the year 2000, for example, and 6 years before that, I also worked with Save the Children, UK, in the regional office in Bangkok. Luckily, those positions that I had in Save the Children and in UNICEF were both within the South and Southeast Asia region. So I was able to connect with a lot of my IMCS, YCS, ICMICA, and YCW friends in those countries. I worked with many of them. I got many of them involved in my projects of work with Save the Children and UNICEF as well. That was really a remarkable reconnection with some of my old friends in IMCS, ICMICA, and so on. Secondly, I think this background and the journey that I've gone through in the Catholic students movement and the international exposure I had was exactly what international organizations like Save the Children and UN are looking for. Yeah. Now they want people who have had that international exposure. They want people who can work in different cultural and social environments. They want people who are articulate, who can communicate, who can do advocacy and influence people. Yeah. They want people who are very good in both the theoretical approach, faculty, thinking, critical thinking, at the same time, good grassroots experience of working with people on the ground. Those are exactly the qualifications that even the UN looks for. So I was an ideal candidate for UNICEF, so to speak. Yeah. The difference was, having joined UNICEF in 2000, I then had this fantastic opportunity to work directly with governments. I sometimes ask myself the question, why did I move from NGOs to UN? And I think, in my view, one of the main reasons why I did that although I appreciated and committed myself so much to the work of NGOs on the ground, NGOs are not always good in influencing policy or working at a very high level of policy advocacy. Yeah. That is what I wanted to do. I wanted to work at a high policy level to influence change that can benefit people around the country, or globally, or regionally. Much wider impact of the policy influence that you can have. And working with governments, you can do that. So I had the privilege to work with most government officials, agencies, organizations in most countries in South and Southeast Asia. Yeah, nearly all the countries. I met with ministers at the highest level. I met with heads of state. I met with commissions of education, health, ministries of social welfare, ministries of finance, of planning. It was a fantastic experience working at that level. Yeah. And the agenda was to work for children. UNICEF works for children. Yeah. So as much as I worked in the student movement for students, here I was working for children with the same approach, with the same intellectual faculty and the experience and the skills that I accumulated in the student movement. That was tremendous, to be able to use that faculty, the knowledge, the experience of student movements, to apply it in the context of working with governments and big international organizations, donors, and others in the UN system. Yeah. That took me from Bangkok to New York. I served 6 years in New York as the head of the Adolescent or Youth Development and Participation Unit in UNICEF New York, which again gave me the fantastic opportunity and the privilege to travel to Africa, a little bit in Latin America, Caribbean, but a lot of travel in the Middle East and Europe, working with youth organizations working on youth policy, working on adolescent girls, adolescent health, mental health, and programs like that with UNICEF. So I then have really, once again, like my old days of IMCS and Pax Romana, I'd gone back to a global position of working on global issues with countries from all over different regions and so on. Yeah. So that is something I cherish very much. Now, when I look back after retirement from UNICEF, 16 years, again, I'm one of those few privileged people. Like you said, yeah, I worked at all the different levels within IMCS, ICMICA, and so on. I similarly worked with the same levels in the UN. I worked at a country level in Malaysia, my last posting, from 2010 to 2016. I worked at the regional level in Bangkok from 2000 to 2004, and then in New York at the global level from 2010 to 2004 to 2010. So again, in UN, I work at the national level, regional level, and global level. Yeah. So I'm so grateful for that opportunity to be able to serve both Pax Romana and the UN at all the different levels. Yeah. So that, in a way, was another layer of my knowledge, my experience, and my expertise. Working with the UN, with big international players, donors, and understanding the politics within the UN system, how it works, politics within national governments and local governments and how that works, yeah, and the interface between government, civil society, business, and others. Yeah. That was a fantastic experience, and this work with the UN exposed me to all those different levels. So having retired, I am now very much using all that knowledge and experience that I gained, not only in Pax Romana, but also the global work that I did with the United Nations in my teaching now, in my research. I still do consultancies with the UN. They keep pulling me back to do consultancies in different countries, which I enjoy because I still work with a lot of friends. I know a lot of friends still in the UN and UNICEF in particular. But I also use that for teaching my BA, MA, and my PhD students. I teach in 3 universities here in Thailand, Chulalongkorn, Mahidol, and Thammasat University. I also teach in other countries, also in Canada and in Europe, in a few other universities. So this, I've tried as much as possible to draw on this knowledge and expertise that I've gained in all this work in my teaching too. So many times when I give examples to my students of a particular issue, like poverty or climate change and so on, I draw on my experience with ICAF or with the student movement. And I say, you know, way back in the 1980s, this is exactly what we were demanding. Yeah. And I try to connect that history of my work and experience with what I'm doing now and try to share that knowledge. And that's something that I'd like to talk about at the end, is to hand over this knowledge and expertise to the younger generation. That is a key challenge for us now, because IMCS now and ICMICA is a completely new generation. It was not a generation that fussed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So a generation that has grown up in a completely different world, a generation that speaks a different language, a generation that has a different social behavior, a generation that has different hopes, aspirations, and dreams. Yeah. And we need to connect that. And that is what I would call the intergenerational dialogue that we need to promote within Pax Romana as well.
Yeah. I mean, listening to the story that how it flows from the 60s, where the movements, the Pax Romana movement had the peak activism around the world. That you have worked with the Pax Romana and with the civil society organizations, UN bodies, is so. I'm inspired. I'm itched to listen to you, and also that you when you mentioned Thailand, I remembered that you met your wife also through the movement.
Yes.
Who's a Thai national, I'm sure that you have, while these inspirational stories, I'm sure you have quite a lot of interesting stories. Maybe you can share some of these stories with us.
Yeah. So maybe two stories. One is, of course, yes, I met my wife Juanita. Lek, we call her. Lek is a nickname, and Lek was very active in the CSFT, the Catholic Students Federation of Thailand, with YCS, and started with the Thailand YCS, which is called the CSFT here for many years. And then she also became the team member of YCS Asia in Singapore. And later they moved to Hong Kong and they shifted their secretariat. So she's had both the country as well as the regional experience of working with YCS in the team. And when we announced that we're going to get married, everybody said, oh, this is a movement marriage. They called it the movement marriage, YCS and IMCS. And I don't know whether I was the first, but many followed after that. Now I have many friends, we call ourselves movement marriage. We have many friends who married within IMCS, YCS, and ICMICA. Yeah. So we should make a list of all those who have had these movement marriages. But yes, we met in the student movement. We went through workshops. We went through exposures. We went through all the camps and all the fun, the travel, etc. And then we decided to get married and to be together. Yeah. So that was, I think, a highlight, of course. Yeah. We got married in 1988. Just a few months before that, I had given my final decision to ICMICA to become the Secretary General of Pax Romana. That took a long time for me to make that decision. But when I did that also with announcing at the same time that I'm going to get married to Juanita. And therefore, our wedding was very complex. We had to have a Thai wedding because she's from Thailand, and also an Indian wedding because I come from India. My parents would not allow me to just get married in Thailand and go. So we had actually 3 or 4 weddings, actually, honestly say. We started off with a Thai ceremony. Now, Thai weddings always have a ceremony. Yeah, it's like an engagement ceremony and so on. We had a Thai ceremony. Then we had a mass in the church in Thailand. My parents, my sister were able to come, not everyone. We had a mass in the church. We went to India and we had more like an Indian, not really church, but Indian wedding with my parents. That was in Delhi. Then I went down south and all my ICA friends grabbed me and said, you must come down, we must celebrate your wedding. 4th wedding with all the ICAF and friends in southern India. That was held in Madurai. My colleague and friend, my best friend in ICAF, Henry Tiffane, who was secretary with me in IMCS, organized it with other friends, many of whom passed away. All of them organized it and we had a fantastic gathering. 4 wedding ceremonies. I was, again, very privileged to do that. Within a week, we went back to Thailand and Juanita and I flew to Geneva because I started my work with ICMICA. Everybody was teasing us. You guys are so lucky. You get married and you go for a honeymoon to Switzerland. Yeah, I still remember that. They still tease me even now, which is true. We are very lucky. God gave us that blessing. We moved to Switzerland for our honeymoon, but also to start my work as ICMICA. So that's one story. The second story is this. So while we were in Geneva, Lek also got pregnant. And I had already, before that, started writing my thesis for my PhD when I was back in Hong Kong and in India. I continued that work while I was in Geneva, while I worked at Pax Romana. I was still writing my PhD thesis. I was finishing it up at that time. So, in 1991, while I was at Pax Romana, 1 year before I finished, I put the last word on my thesis the day my daughter was born in Geneva. Malika, her name is Malika. She's now 31 years old. Malika was born in Geneva in the presence of Francois Lapierre, my chaplain at that time, who blessed us, in the presence of Linda Wirth, who was secretary of IMCS International Team, who was in ILO at that time, and in presence of Ramon Sugranias and so many other friends, Lucien Morin, Piet van Dogen, William Neville, Raj Kumar, all these people from ICMICA were with us, luckily, when Malika was born in Geneva. So that's another story that I will not forget, always with me in my journey, is my daughter was also signaled the completion of my PhD work. When I finished the thesis that same night, when we brought her home, I wrote the last word on my thesis and sent it off. Yeah. So those are some good memories of life, personal life and family life also with Pax Romana. There are many other stories, but these would be the two big highlights.
Yeah. So 100 years, the Pax Romana, this is the year that we are celebrating the 100 years Pax Romana. So these are the success stories of Pax Romana, that movement has built people, and these people have built the movement. You have contributed years and years to the growth of the movement. So it is interesting to hear these personal stories. I think, there are quite a lot of couples who have met through the movement.
Yes.
In all the coordinations, in
Yes.
all the movements. So the count this as also as the success stories of the movement.
Yes, definitely. Should be part of the success story, milestones. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, as you have been with the movement for a long time, as we discussed, and also this experience has contributed to your professional life, and it has been taking and giving back to the society continuously. The Pax Romana movement is about contributing to the society, that starting from the 1921, that has been our purpose. So the new generation, as you said, our generation is quite different and going through different difficulties with the challenges of the time. So, like when I'm listening to your stories, sometimes it is unbelievable that how the 1960s, 70s, 80s, this much of work being done in the student movement and the professional movement with the little technology available. So,
Yes.
but it's your message to the current movement and our future generation, those who are coming after you and me, the inspiration that you want to share with us in this moment that we are celebrating our 100 years birthday of the Pax Romana movement.
Yeah. I think for me that is important, a very important question that concerns me, and I think also concerns the future of Pax Romana and the Catholic students movement. Yeah, is how do we connect this rich history? Yeah, there's been so much that has happened all over the world in different phases that we've moved as a movement, we've grown, and how to connect that and be able to, that will benefit the current leadership and the membership of the student movement in Pax Romana. Yeah, that is an important question. Yeah, in my view, there's definitely many things that I learned which I think are valid even today. Yeah, the first is that we always have to connect our intellectual abilities, our thinking, our social analysis, our critical thinking of, and also our Christian faith and our theology with the footprint. That is connecting to people on the ground. Yeah. In the lives of people who are struggling, yeah, the people whose human rights are being violated, people whose lands are being taken, and so on, to be able to connect these two things. Very, very important. Yeah. So it's not only an intellectual exercise. Yeah. The intellectual ability or understanding of society is a means by which we apply that to the struggles of the people, to help them, to support them, show solidarity with them is what is critical. Yeah. So that would be the first important. So therefore, critical thinking is extremely important. Frameworks like the social analysis and approaches and worldviews, including liberation theology and so on, are key in helping us with that understanding. But just that is not enough. Yeah, we need to be connected with people on the ground, not only students, but also the social movements. That to me has always been a principle or an approach that has followed me right through my journey. You know. The second is that we have to see where the students can have the greatest impact. Yeah. Definitely we have to start with the family. Yeah. All of us go through struggles. Yeah. And I gave you some examples of the struggles that I went through in my family. Yeah. But that struggle I went through with my family, and to be able to resolve that, to be able to address it, if not resolve it, was critical in all the support that I got from my family in the years to come. You know, this is important. That's where, in my view, the first engagement between students and adults comes in, the intergenerational dialogue. That's where it starts. And if you can succeed in that, you can succeed wider in society. It's not a problem. Yeah. So family is important. The school, the college is important. Yeah. And in some of the work that I described of my past, particularly in JNU as well as in Bangalore, I was very active within the university, within the college, within the school, not only outside of society. You know what I mean? So that connection is also important. We have to link what has happened within the educational system, and we all know the challenges of our current educational system. We have to critique that, but see that as part of a critique of a wider society. We have to be involved in changing policies within education, the teaching methodologies, the type of learning, and the type of social activities that are promoted or not promoted within the universities and with the wider society. Yeah. So that's a second important thing. Yeah. The third is, for me, what was also important was the interfaith approach. Yeah. And as I told you, from the tradition of ICAF onwards, I've always been working with an approach that respects all faiths. Yeah. That respects the teachings of all faiths, and always I look for the commonality, not what is different. There's too much focus on difference across religions. We have to focus on the commonalities. And if you look at the basic human values in all the major religions, you will see they are more or less the same. The basic human values. If you strip out the structures, you strip out the dogma, and you focus on the human values of all religions. Human values I mean respect, love, non-discrimination, compassion, human rights, altruism, sincerity, love for the other person, etc. Charity. These are basic human values in all religions. Yeah? And that is what binds us together. And that's what I feel that we should today pursue. And I think it's very important for students today to take that approach of focusing on basic human values that unite us rather than issues that divide us across various religions. That be the third. The fourth is, yes, like I said, right, we did so much. If you look back and see what we did in ICAF and IMCS ICMICA during that time, all the conferences we organized, all the publications we brought out, all the connections we made that without the World Wide Web, without the internet, without Facebook, without Twitter, without WhatsApp, sometimes even without mobile phones. So, it is possible. That human connection that was there, that I think is under threat now. And we were able to do so much just by the fact that we are committed to getting things done with whatever technology that was available to us at that time. Now, the present generation of students, have an additional advantage. You have a technology today in the hands of young people and students that has revolutionized information, that has revolutionized communication, that has revolutionized social engagement. So today you're seeing now social movements capitalizing on this new technology. So I was just participating in the last few months in the virtual World Social Forum. And it's amazing how well it was organized. We did miss the physical presence. We did miss the shaking hands and hugging and having fun together as a group of NGOs. But the level of discussions were as good, even when it was online. So we have this technology that we can harness to our advantage. Yeah. And that is what we, as the older generation, need to understand. There's a big knowledge gap between the older generation and the present generation in how to be able to use this new language and the new medium of technology. And I think we have to facilitate more understanding and mutual agreement on how this is actually can be used for the advantage of the student movement as we move forward. Thirdly, I would say that this is within the church, I think, and I've said this before. I think with Pope Francis as the head of the church, we have had a tremendous advantage. To go back to Vatican II, to go back to a lot of things that we did as a student movement in the 80s and 90s, because today what Pope Francis is saying and what he's doing is reinforcing many of the things that were done by IMCS and Pax Romana. So we have to take advantage of that. This window, we do not know how long it's going to be on. Question we have to ask ourselves, how are we capitalizing on this leadership, this tremendous inspiration and wisdom that Pope Francis is bringing to the church and the world today? He is one of the most respected world leaders when it comes to any global issue, whether it's climate change or war and conflict and so on. How are we as Pax Romana capitalizing on that? How are our churches, our bishops, our clergy and lay people realizing this tremendous opportunity we have to bring back that history of the church? And this is, I think, a message for young people as well today. Because I think young people today are better connected with what Pope Francis is saying. And I think they can be seen as real missionaries of that message that Pope Francis is giving to the world today. So that's my point, is that we have to realize the juncture at which the church is today, the tremendous advantages we have of a leadership like Pope Francis, and be able to build the foundation where movements like Pax Romana and so on are seen at the forefront of the movement of lay people within the church. Those would be some of my few learnings that I think are relevant also to the students of IMCS and Pax Romana in ICMICA today.
So thank you, Victor. I think you have given us quite a lot of time sharing these experiences. What do you want to say in a one word Batin movement has been, and to the movement, what do you want to, not one word, in a one sentence, what do you want to say to the entire movement? The one last thing.
Yeah, my short message to the movement would be, go back and discover the wisdom that has shaped the movement of Pax Romana over all these decades. Build on it, improve on it, and be the torchbearers of a strong laden within the church and a strong student movement in society.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us all this time and all these stories and how you have walked through this path before us. So I'm sure that these interviews, these memory collections are going to be quite inspirational to the people who are coming after us, after me, after you. So thank you very much again, Victor. So looking forward to meet you face to face in when
Yes.
the situation goes down. We should come together and celebrate the 100 years of the movement together. Even though pandemic has kind of restricted us, I hope that things will get better and we will be able to meet. So thank you very much. Looking forward to see you again. So let's finish our meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best and good luck. Happy to share my journey with Pax Romana. Thank you.